Hello and welcome to the Groupthink Podcast. This is your enigmatic host, Tyler the AntiSocial Critic. For this special episode, we're going to be doing something a little bit different this week. I have a recorded interview with prolific author and video production person by the name of Tom McComas, who's famous for his Lionel's Greatest Collector Series book guide, I Love Toy Trains, Lionel Nation, and stuff of this. He's kind of prolific in the model railroading arena. If this sounds a little bit weird for a choice for the podcast, it's largely because I'm weird and you don't know me that well. But well, in a second, I'm going to start the recording. I apologize up front. The recording is kind of it was recorded in my car, so a lot of the quality is kind of crap. But I'm going to do my best to edit it, so it won't sound completely unlistenable. But I hope you enjoy the content, and thank you very much for listening.
Did you do any research on us?
Yes, of course, and I've seen a lot of the videos you've published. So,
Are you a train guy?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
All right, so getting started. Can you? I'm obviously familiar with a lot of what TM Books and Videos is kind of known for publishing. Can you kind of give a quick summary of TM's history and what you guys do?
Well, we started in 1974 with a collector's guidebook to Lionel trains, the post-war era. And at that time, no book had been. Greenberg hadn't started his books, and the hobby was just beginning to grow as the baby boomers who grew up in the 50s, when Lionel was the largest toy company in the world, and everybody wanted a Lionel train for Christmas. They were getting older and could now buy the trains that they wanted as kids. So the hobby began to grow rapidly, and we made a mailing. There were 7,000 members to the Train Collectors Association. And within 2 or 3 years, it was up to 30,000. So it grew immensely in a short period of time. And we did a collector's guide book for post, and it was the first book ever done as a guide. Otherwise, information was disseminated by word of mouth or phone calls, because people wanted to know in a certain category like F3s or steam engines, what were the most sought after, what were the most valuable trains in that category, the hardest to find, the rarest. And we printed 10,000 books and sold them out in 6 months. We sold out very rapidly, and that put us in the publishing business. And then in the next 5 years, we published and wrote 5 more books, 6 books actually. We broke the collecting into eras: the pre-war era, the post-war era, the modern era, and then standard gauge and O gauge in the pre-war. A book for each one of those categories. And in the books, we told the history of the company. We told the history of Lionel trains, the principles involved over the years, and then color pictures of all the trains in each category, and we listed them as to their rarity. We didn't get into prices, and then a year or 2 later, Greenberg started his price guide books, and they sold very well also, because the hobby was booming at that time.
It was booming by the 70s?
Pardon me?
It was starting to kind of pick up again during the 70s?
Well, in 1969, the Lionel name was, the sales had fallen to under $1 million. They peaked in 1953 with sales of $32 million when they were the largest toy company in the world. And but then as people moved from the suburb to the city, space became less available in apartments, and so the HO trains took a hold, and Lionel sales, and then kids got interested in race car sets and other things, and trains kind of became old-fashioned. So by 1969, sales had fallen to under $1 million, and General Mills came along and made a licensing deal, because General Mills figured out that the post-war boomers would be at peak earning age in 5 or 10 years. So they saw a tremendous growth in the Lionel name, with post-war babies buying all the trains they wanted to have, but as kids, but couldn't get. And so they took they made a licensing deal with Lionel, and then gradually, with General Mills in control, sales grew in the 70s, and then in the 80s, it boomed.
Sure.
So our books played a role in that, because they told collectors what to look for, what were the rarest of the various categories.
Sure. So
a lady came up to me at a show and she said, "I'm very upset with you." And I said, "Well, why? I'd never seen you before in my life." And she said, "Well, my husband bought your book 5 years ago and hasn't spoken to me since."
That's great.
It got some guys in, and it cost the guys a lot of money, but they had a lot of fun.
Sure. So you published the Lionel Collector's Guide. I have a copy with me in 1975. What were you and the people who were working on this kind of doing before then? I seem to recall you guys were like doing television production.
Well, I had a film production company in Chicago. I worked with ad agencies and produced TV spots and documentaries and whatever I could do. But I had a film production company. And then we switched in 87. We came out with the great toy train layouts in America, and we had Frank Sinatra's layout in there. We had, I think, Tom Snyder,
Manny Patinkin.
And, Manny. He wasn't in the book, but we eventually did a video on his layout. And then in Time, People magazine picked that book, wrote about the book in their magazine, and we literally got thousands of orders for it. And that led us into making a video. In, I guess, 1988 was our first video. And Ward Kimball was in it, Sinatra was in it, and other collectors around the country with layout. It was mainly a layout book. And that's the same, and Classic Toy Train magazine started at that same time. So I'd say 87 was a year when the hobby really took off.
Okay, and what is TM Books and Videos kind of working on right now? Because I know you guys have done a lot
right
of...
now we produce licensed shows for John Deere, Caterpillar, Lionel Trains, Case IH, and Ford. For Ford, we just did the history of Ford trucks because it's their 2017 is their 100th anniversary. So we made the commemorative DVD for Ford on the history of their trucks. And then we did a kids series in 1993, I Love Toy Trains, and that has sold over 3 million copies since 1993. And we just did a new I Love Toy Trains video, DVD, it just came out last week.
Very
so
nice.
We're doing a mix of videos, and then, but we still do train videos.
Excellent.
So we're busy.
Very good. So there's two kind of subjects I want to cover real quick while I have your time. I kind of want to cover what production is like at TM Books and Videos, because that's kind of my background. I work in film, and I want to kind of talk about the state of the industry. So what like when I go back and watch some of the old tapes for like the history of the Lionel Hudson or the greatest train layouts, how do you guys there's a lot of shooting that's obviously going on that's staged and on layouts. I kind of recall specifically stuff like there was that round pedestal for the Hudson video where you'd run like a train in a circle and you'd have the camera kind of tail it really fast. So what's kind
You're
of
not supposed to tell anybody about that. That's a secret.
Well, it's observation. Just because I've worked behind a camera, so just like what's kind of the the creative process that goes into coming up with pedestals like that and ideas for how you shoot content for when you're making these videos?
Well, the main thing we do now is green screen. Like on the newest I Love Toy Train video is called Railblazers. And there's a shot with a I Love Toy Train going over a bridge, over a waterfall, with the clouds moving above and a jet plane flying over. So you couldn't do that in any kind of layout. We do have a studio with 5 different layouts. We have a Christmas layout, a post-war layout, pre-war layout, and then we have American Flyer, and we have a John Deere layout where everything is mellow and even the cows are green and yellow. and they're because we made videos for each of those categories. So we use when we do an I Love Toy Train video, we use a mix of stuff we shoot in our own studio, as well as clips from layout stories that we've done on like a real hobby video. That, like, we have a series now called 21st Century Great Layouts. And we might use some footage from that for one of the I Love Toy Train videos. So you get a feeling of variety and different looks when we tell the different stories.
Sure. So, in terms of like post-production, do you guys do everything inside your own studio?
Yes, we edit on Final Cut Pro. We do everything here.
Very nice. That kind of covers the production side of things. Just in terms of the state of the industry, because I'm very curious about this. Because I just kind of, when you do the old greatest train videos, one of the common stories you kind of hear is person who grew up in the 1950s, 60s, had all these kind of toys. They put them up in the attic because they kind of grew up. They needed to focus on girls and cars. Then one day, Christmas comes along, they're digging out their tree, and they find their train set, and 5 years later, they suddenly have a $200,000 fire hazard in the basement. But, and I'm kind of going through that now, just kind of redigging up the trains and kind of trying to rebuild the board and stuff like that, and buying a couple of the ones I wanted when I was young. And going to stuff, like I live very close to the Great Midwestern Train Show out in Winfield, and I've been going there. What's that?
Isn't that in DuPage County?
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah.
But you don't see, like, when the average age of a lot of the people that goes there is kind of like 70. And
if you were 10 years old in 1950, you'd be 77 now.
Yeah, exactly.
And Lionel's peak year was 53. So if you were 10 years old in 53, you'd be 80 years old. So obviously, a lot of those guys who grew up with Lionel are going to the big layout in the sky, and they're just not available.
Yeah.
And so and then we get calls every week from somebody, a wife, saying my husband died, and what am I going to do with all these trains? And so the market is kind of flooded with post-war trains as everyone's trying to get rid of them.
I've noticed that. Like, I noticed the prices are starting to drop. If you don't have the original box, it's like buying a stock that went up to 100 and now it's about 20. Yeah, I just bought a GG1 from the 1980s that was for like $100. That was in really good condition. So it's kind of like shocking, like as an adult now, just because I kind of grew up past when this was the prime. So seeing that the state of the industry is just like declining somewhat, I'm just kind of hoping that there's not going to be a future for model railroading, because I think there's obviously going to be something, but I'm curious as how this is going to work going forward.
Well, the hobby is definitely declining. The big show, York, Pennsylvania, they have it twice a year, every April and every October, and they used to get 16,000 people, and now they don't say what they're getting, but people are guessing around 8,000 or 9,000. And so it's definitely, on the downside, because the kids today aren't interested. They see a toy train, they're fascinated for like 30 seconds, and then most of them are into their smartphone, or there's so many other things to do that trains And then trains cost a lot of money today, even though they're made in China.
Sure. And you still see like occasional surges with like the Polar Express sets that kind of were all the rage for a while. But you don't see a lot of the fan stuff, and I remember a lot of people back in the 90s you would talk about everything kind of resurged for about a decade under Dick Kuhn, and things kind of seemed like they were up for a while, but nowadays a lot of that is kind of on the wayside. So do you think that there's kind of a extended future for Lionel and MTH?
Well, it's hard to say. They keep putting out these 124-page color catalogs that cost them a lot of money, and they've MTH is still under the same ownership, and Lionel has been taken over by NASCAR, I guess.
Really?
And they're now in North Carolina now, and so the future's unknown. But NASCAR decided they were worth something, or they took over the marketing of it.
That's fascinating. The last thing I'd heard about them was that they'd moved their headquarters to New York. I did not heard that they'd moved to South Carolina under NASCAR.
Yeah, it didn't work out in New York. And there's a holding company that owns Lionel. I can't think of their name right now, but then they're the ones who made the deal with NASCAR. And but marketing toy trains today is not easy. In the 50s, there used to be advertisements on the cartoon shows every Saturday morning of Lionel trains, and now you never see them because I guess they don't have a budget for advertising.
It's also a very, it's by the standards of niche industries, you're only going to be really advertising to people who are in it. So it's very hard to find new converts unless you find kids that are into Thomas the Tank Engine nowadays.
Well, our I Love Toy Train series has exposed toy trains. I mean, we get calls every day and that first copy came out in '93, and that's exposed toy trains to a lot of people outside the hobby, because the magazines like Ogay's Railroading and Classic Toy Trains, they just preach to the choir. There's nobody outside the hobby that reads those magazines. So, in that sense, that everybody tries to come up with ideas to expose the hobby to new markets so we get more people in it. But our video series really has done that more than anything else. And but then people decide to buy a train, and they go out and they find out it's going to cost them, $3,000 or $4,000 to build a layout, and they decide, to look for something else.
It's interesting because I still go out to Walmart or Meijer, and they still carry model railroader. Do you think there's more of a future?
They do only in the fourth quarter, though. They don't all year round.
Okay, I see them. I occasionally check, and I see them. So that's probably the case. But do you think that that's kind of where the future of the industry lies, just in the HO aspects?
Well, HO is falling again because those guys involved in HO are getting older. So, and no one's picking up the torch there either. So, I would say it's never going to grow. It's going to be how long they can maintain a steady decline, because there's nobody doing anything to get new blood in the hobby.
Yeah, one can be hopeful, I guess.
But what's interesting is our shows are all available on Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime members can see our shows for free, and if you're not, you can still download or stream for a nominal price. But the amazing thing there is our kid videos every month get over 1 million downloads and streams. Over 1 million in a 30-day period. And these are mainly young kids who just want to watch trains. And if there were a way, I mean, we've never obviously sold 1 million DVDs in a month, but we'd get 1 million streams in a month. So that's encouraging in the sense that young kids still have a fascination for trains, and somebody just has to figure out a way to make them available at a lower price, or somehow market to that market, because it's a huge market out there. If the interest in trains hasn't faded, kids still love them.
That's really cool to hear. So we just hit 20 minutes. I thank you a lot for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, mention our website. If they want to see any of our titles, they can go to tmbv.com and then search those titles on Amazon. If they're an Amazon Prime member, they can see them for free.
Sure thing. So for me personally,
okay.
I've seen a lot of your videos. Like, I seem to recall that my dad sold you a copy. My dad was sold a copy of I Love Toy Trains at the Great Midwest Train Show when I was a very little kid. So I've kind of grown up with that. So I do appreciate your time.
Okay.
All right. Have a good day, Mr. McComas.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you very much for listening through that. This has been an episode of Groupthink Podcast. Special thanks again to Mr. McComas for giving us a few moments of his time. Have a good day, everyone.